it's on so many of the front pages now about this BBC star who's, you know, been accused of soliciting pictures from a teenager and then sending some pictures back.
Yeah,
so
apparently this BBC presenter, that's what we're told, presenter, is a household name.
They must earn a bit of money, because apparently they've paid £35,000 for these pictures.
For these pictures from, sort of soliciting these pictures from a teenager. Sending them a lot of money, and you have to earn big money to be able to just fork out 35 grand. And apparently this person is a household name. Nobody, when you work in television, you immediately get rung up by everyone you can think of, saying, you must know who it is. Who is it?
No.
We actually really do not know.
No.
But apparently that person has been taken off the air now.
But there's allegations...
But they weren't taken off the air soon enough.
No, there's allegations that... Because this was reported back in May, and they've only just been taken off the air when the story's broken. So what have the BBC done about it up until now? And, of course, there is a big question with this, because people like Rylan Clark...
Jeremy
Vine...
Gary Lineker...
have all come out and said, it's not us. Now, so if you work for the BBC, and you're a man earning a certain amount of money...
And you're a household name...
There's going to be a lot of pressure on you to say, well, it isn't me. And you shouldn't have to do that.
No, it shouldn't, because you're innocent until proven guilty, which is why you're usually not named in these circumstances. But not naming this person almost casts that horrible shadow over every other, well-known male presenter at the BBC. So I think it's not being handled well at all.
No, it's not. Let's get the latest from Stephanie Takyi, who's actually in Rotterdam at the moment. I mean, Stephanie, this is a hugely difficult story in some respects, isn't it?
Yes, Stephen, it is a difficult case to navigate, both for the BBC and both for the woman in question and her mother. Her mother's been left horrified about how the BBC has dealt with this situation, because she went to the BBC in May about the situation that her daughter had been solicited by this well-known presenter. And she was quite surprised that since May, this unnamed presenter has still been on air. The BBC have come out with a statement and said that they have been investigating it, but it's all about gathering the right evidence. I know this woman, this mother in question, says that she's seen payments from this star, like 5,000 a pop, like detailing from about 3 years ago towards her daughter to send these pictures to the star. But the BBC still have a duty of care on both sides, both to the claimant and both to the presenter in question. But what's happened now is, now that there's this witch hunt from the public and both the industry to find out who this presenter is, they're going to now have to investigate this at full steam. And I think because it hasn't been public knowledge, I think the BBC, if I can say it, has been taking their time in investigating this situation. And they probably didn't think it would get as much attention as it has now.
I mean, it does raise the question, and it's a fair one. I mean, because you can say, well, it's all come to light now, and the BBC have taken this person off air. But the point is, if they knew these allegations were being made back in May, it's 2 months ago, the question is, shouldn't they have taken action immediately while it was investigated?
Totally, and it feels like history repeating itself. So we've seen so many scandals recently, whether it's the Philip Schofield, or if you even want to go much bigger than that, there's been so many names over the years where there's been investigations, and there's always been that key question of why haven't these matters been handled straight away and very swiftly? And this is where the BBC kind of have paint on their face at the moment, because those questions are going to be asked, and you're dealing with someone who was a teenager at the time, who has been exploited by one of their household name stars, and it's not going to be a situation that's going to be able to be swept underneath the carpet. And I think the BBC now will, be trying to put out all these statements to say they've had to do the right investigations, they've had to provide the evidence, because from what I've read in the statements, it seems like they've been lacking evidence from the claimant as well. So I think this is why the BBC have also been dragging their feet on this situation.
Yes, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? As you say, to a certain extent, you have to give the BBC time to investigate it properly. But this was complained about in May. And It is such a serious thing. I mean, it could potentially even involve criminal proceedings because if any of the allegations are true, I mean, it may be against the law. Asking a youngster to send sexual images to him. It just seems to take such a long time. It's wrong to keep that person on the air, and apparently they did until The Sun came out with this story just a couple of days ago.
And I think that's what the problem is, Anne, because what's going to happen eventually, the media already, know who this person is, not going to name him. But what's going to happen, a lot of people are going to keep on pressing for this presenter to be named. And the BBC face a big problem on their hands because once that name is made publicly, it's definitely...
Oh, we've lost...
lost Stephanie.
Yeah.
We got all the points there, though. I mean, but... Stephanie's back. Stephanie, you were saying?
Hi there. The BBC do face a big problem on their hands because eventually the newspapers are not going to let it lie. They're going to keep on pressing until we can name this person. And once people do know this household name, it's going to be quite shocking, to be honest.
And of course, I mean, yet again, what we've got after the Philip Schofield problem, we've got, again, the problem of how a TV company handles its big stars. Because once you create a big star and and they are regularly on air, you have a certain responsibility towards the public and particularly young people they're influencing.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago, and that ITV had to go to Parliament to answer all these questions. And now it seems like the BBC would be trailing behind them, because I think for so long in the media industry, there's been this culture of protecting your household stars. But you can't be doing that when it's involved teenagers who are being exploited. And, the public puts so much trust in the household names that we watch and that we love. And I think these bosses think there's been this culture of protection for too long. And I think that's all turning on its head now. And with these stories, it's only a matter of time before someone speaks out.
I mean, there is a problem with this, and it's where it gets complex, because, of course, we don't know. This person is innocent until proven guilty. The allegations have been made, but we don't know that they have actually done anything wrong, which is why, they're not being named at the moment. However, what it has done, it's left every other male BBC presenter who's
guilty
a household
until proven
name.
innocent.
Well, exactly. So they're having to come out and sort of defend themselves now, which seems very unfair.
Well, this is now where the story's getting seen because, all these different presenters, Gary Lineker, Ryan and Clark, Nicky Campbell, he's even had to, approach Twitter and report trolls because he says he has to take a stand because it's quite damaging for these people as well their names to be thrown into the mix. And this is where the BBC now are going to have to take it to this next level and either represent this unnamed presenter and say this is actually the facts which is happening in this case and, it's none of the rest of our talent. So this is where the situation becomes a bit difficult. And we do talk about mental health, as we've seen with Philip Schofield. There's a lot of pressure. So whoever this presenter is who hasn't been named, they're probably quite scared right now for their career. And it's not long until people put two and two of who's missing off the BBC screens at the moment.
That's right, absolutely. I'm sure social media must be completely flooded with people's ideas and thoughts about who this person is.
But of course, again, that highlights the problem, doesn't it? Because 99% of them will be wrong. The minute you see various names pop up, most of them, they can't all be right.
It's a very interesting conundrum. Go ahead, Stephanie.
No, but I was just going to say, always in these cases, as with the Philip Schofield one, there's always a young person who's involved in this. I think there's always the sensationalism about who the presenter is. But, from what I've read, this was a 17-year-old girl who has drug addictions, and this presenter was using this money to help support her habit if it is proven true. So I think this is where the BBC and the general public have to navigate it quite properly because there is a young person involved, and if that person's named, it also affects her mental health, and her life will then change.
That's actually it's a very good point, Steph, because we're talking about the star who may or may not have done something wrong here, but we haven't talked about the victim in this, which is a problem, actually.
And it's very interesting. This morning, Stephanie, I've noticed that the Sun, which knows the identity and broke the story, and a lot of the other papers are being very careful not to actually say whether it's a girl or a boy who is the victim. They're using the victim, the youngster, the teenager, the child. And when they quote the mother saying how upset she is, she talks about my child was doing this, my child was asked to do that. And I'm wondering if they're just trying to protect identity, maybe, by even now protecting whether it was a boy or a girl.
Well, they are trying to protect this person, but I think what happens, as we saw with the Philip Schofield situation, they didn't need to name the man in question. You just needed to go on Twitter and his picture was all flooded over people's timelines. So the media are doing the right thing in terms of reporting accurately. But I think when you come to the public now, as we've seen with these different BBC presenters who have been dragged into it, people will start talking, and even people close to the victim, if they're not careful, will start talking to the papers as well.
Yeah.
Stephen and I were talking a few minutes ago about the fact that if you work in television, people ring you up because they assume you must know. Well, you have better contacts than nearly anybody in the press as well as telly. Do you know who it is?
Yes, and I do know who it is. We got the story actually a few weeks ago, and we knew the name. We had been hearing rumours about this presenter, but again, you get a tip about these stories, and you're always sceptical about whether there's any truth to it, whether we can stand it up. So we did get a tip a few weeks in our newsroom, and just yesterday, my editor, told me who it was. And again, with the Philip Schofield thing, people were sitting on that story for so many years, and so I can imagine the Sun have been building up this story as well, and it just spreads like a wildfire. And it's if it is true and it is this person, I think it's definitely going to be a very big story that we'll be talking about for a while.